Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us. This is the second edition of the Pulse webinar series. It's a community-driven initiative by PRCA APAC, Public Affairs Group, or PAG for short. And the idea is simple. Create a space where public affairs and communications professionals across the region can come together, discuss trends, developments, and issues that catch our eye, and reflect on how they shape the way we think about our work. Today, we're looking at one such opportunity, the Singapore Grand Prix. Now, we often see Formula One as a sporting spectacle, but it's more than that, right? With Malaysia no longer hosting a race, Singapore now stands as the region's only Grand Prix. And it makes it not just a world-class event, but we think it's also a platform for brands to build associations, to tell stories that resonate across our region. And the stakes are high. We found that nearly 90% of related spending during F1 flows into local enterprises. And these range from hospitality and MICE to professional services. And for us in communications and public affairs, I guess the question has to be, how do we leverage these moments to create lasting value? How do we manage reputational risks when the stakes are so high? And how do we make smarter decisions in real time? And that's what today's conversation is going to be about. We'll explore the lessons for communicators and public affairs professionals, what these lessons mean for large moments, big moments like F1, and how do we apply them in the way we work with brands. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by two outstanding industry colleagues whom I'm very happy and delighted to be able to call friends. Tiffany, who leads the government sector at True Scope. She works closely with the public sector clients and agencies alike on media intelligence, data, issues management. And other than the public sector, she also works with commercial clients, commercial brands in sectors like healthcare, tech, and energy. And we have Daryl too joining us on this webinar. Daryl is the managing director of We Communication Singapore, where he advises public sector as well as global consumer tech and healthcare clients on brand reputation and integrated storytelling. And on a personal note, Daryl was also my former boss at We Communications, and so it's personally it's fantastic. I learned a great deal from Daryl's We First leadership, something that PM Lawrence Wong emphasized at the National Day rally. And this makes today's webinar especially an added treat for me, if I can put it that way. So I'm delighted to also share that both Daryl and Tiffany, they serve with me on the PRCA APAC Public Affairs Group. They bring in not just their organizational experience, but I think what we also want to tap on are their insights from the clients and the industries that they serve. So Tiffany and Daryl, welcome.
Thank you, Marcus.
Thank you, Marcus.
Already
Very
zoom,
happy to-
zoom and box for everybody. Hopefully this is going to be valuable for everybody that's on the webinar as well.
Absolutely. And on that topic of speed, let's dive right in, shall we? Now, let's start with something light. So if both of you had to describe F1 in one word, whether it's from the perspective of the sport itself, the brand experience, or what it means to you personally, what would that word be and why? Maybe we'll let Tiffany go first.
Sure. I would say it's infectious. Even as someone who is pretty neutral towards F1, sorry to offense out there, I thought the crowd, the atmosphere, the hype always had this ability to capture my attention. Like F1 is so exciting and it also generates a lot of interest, not just from the racers themselves, but also the technology behind it. How do you then make the cars faster, better, and things like that? And as someone like who went to F1, I actually honestly went there for the fringe events initially, but then I got like wowed by the whole atmosphere and stuff like that. Because I feel like there's so much spillover effects. So it also like creates a lot of interest for fringe activities featuring the latest singers, the latest collectible merch, and of course the F&B. So it's like this giant party. It's very enjoyable for me.
Fantastic. Infectious, that's your word, Tiffany.
Yeah.
And we can already see the viral effect of what a big event like F1 can have, right? Spillover. Daryl, what about you?
Wow, incidentally, we did not plan this. My word also happens to start with an I.
Oh,
But the word is imaginative, right? I think the sport has grown immensely, but I also think it gives us, if you look at the way F1 is crafted, you also think about how these things are things of the future, right? Some things that you have to imagine, even if you are a lover of the sport, you will never truly be able to experience what it feels like to be in an F1 car. And a lot of that requires imagination for you to love it, right? But then if you're neutral to the sport and you get infected by everything else, you also get to see where the imagination can take all of the sport, right? That it is not just a sport. It goes beyond that a lot more, and we can discuss a lot more of that today. But yes, imaginative is my I word as
mm,
well.
Superb, superb. Double eyes, that future orientedness. Let's zoom out now. I think let's build on what what you shared. And I want to focus on the economic opportunities. We talk about possibilities, we talk about future orientedness, and that's very much how Singapore and our region seems to be oriented, right, towards that future. If you want to see the future come to Asia, they say. So let's start with the business side of F1. We think about big sponsors, hospitality players. But in truth, as I shared in my opening, 90% of spending actually goes to local enterprises. So beyond the big boys, hospitality, tourism, what are your thoughts? How do you think businesses in Southeast Asia can capture value from mega events like F1?
mm.
Yep. Maybe I'll invite Daryl this time, Daryl to start.
It's a brilliant point. I think there are a few sides to the picture, right? I think one, there is obviously the people on the ground, the consumers that receive it, and they don't always see the complexity and the multiple layers within a mega event like this. I think from an economic standpoint, there is many reasons why Singapore invested into this many years ago. I think the foresight of our government and the ability to take something and make it even better, I think was something that was brilliantly crafted many years ago when we started this in 2008. I mean, just to give you an example of an economic impact, right? And Marcus, you brought up a very good point. 90% of that spend actually spills over to the smaller businesses. Many of you that are fans would have heard, and if you're not fan, this is a bit of a fun fact for you. You would have heard that Thailand just put in their bid to host F1 in 2028, and the parliament approved a $1.2 billion bid, right?
Mm.
And it is an interesting area where you look at why is a market like Thailand doing it. Obviously, from a travel tourism perspective, a lot of their GDP is anchored on it. But also, you look at the way Thailand is structured economically, and you look at the ability for them to be one of the, I think now if they do get it approved, it'll be one of the 3 street races or 4 street races around the world. And you look at all the streets and all the businesses that make up Thailand, majority of them are going to be small, medium enterprises, right? And they're going to be small, medium businesses. A lot of that is where Thailand's economic power has been because of the travel and the hospitality space. And that will continue to thrive, right? It will continue to spill over to this group of people because the reality is that people don't just come for the event, they come for all of the activities around it, the pre, the during, and the post. So there is there's definitely a lot of economic impact. I think the question that we maybe should think about is what and which ones are the bigger, or the bigger catchers of the impact, right? Because obviously there are different ways to look at, where this economic impact will be felt. But Thailand's a great example, I think 1.2 billion for 2028. I think that's a good fun fact. The other fun fact is this.
Yep.
And this one maybe not so much from a small business perspective. LVMH last year inked a deal, right, to sponsor F1, and it's a $1 billion deal. You could argue that all of you love your Louis Vuittons and your and the brands under the LVMH brand, but there is a reason why they have decided that this is a good spillover deal for them to do, because it does have effect on the brand. the value that people connect the dots with LVMH and speed, and and who doesn't love fast cars and fast fashion, right? Those two things always go together, and luxury always travels along with those as well. So definitely economic impact. And I think Singapore has benefited in multiple ways, and hopefully, with Thailand winning this, it adds on to the region, adds on to Southeast Asia as a whole.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think, Daryl, you covered several great things there. I think number one, when we think about building national brands, national champions, I think they come from SMEs. I think Singapore seems to be a bit of an exception, where a lot of our economic impact comes from MNCs and the opportunities that they create, right? SME serves the MNCs in Singapore. The rest of the region, most of businesses come from SMEs, actually, powering their economic growth. And I think there's a lot of potential to build national brands that way. So it could be instructive to inspire how we want to build our national brands too.
Yep.
The second point that you make, Daryl, is regarding services and how much of that accounts for the Thai economy. I just did a quick check, right? 60% tourism, and so there are clearly going to be spillover effects. And thirdly, Daryl, you also covered the ASEAN effect, that connectivity, where it's a 3-hour or 4-hour plane ride across our region. Perhaps the whole can be much greater than the sum of our individual parts when we come together through mega events like F1. If we work together, maybe we can create something much greater than what any one economy can generate. Thank you. Thanks, Daryl, for sharing that. I think there are clear economic spillovers. And Tiffany, I want to tap on you now. Data-driven media intelligence. Now, tell us a little bit more. How are you seeing these spillover effects and opportunities for local businesses?
So I really think that maybe coming from a B2B perspective, beyond just F1 itself, you draw in a lot of people from all over the world. These people fly in 20, maybe 12, 13, 14 hours all the way to this part of the world. They don't just stay for just F1. And a lot of them are businessmen, your angel investors, your VCs. They're actually looking for like opportunities in this part of the world that they can tap on. So I think we would it'd be wise if businesses can tap on events around it, such as like Tech Week Singapore, Token 2049, or even in the region, to meet these people and facilitate deals on the side. I've seen something like that in effect in my previous role working in economic agency in Singapore. We try to do a lot of this business matching alongside these events. That's also a way to help our local companies and startups to grow, because by tapping on their networks, you can expand outside of Singapore as well. So especially in times where there's a lot more protectionistic economy, so having the right partners in the right areas would help you to better navigate the complex supply chain, and also like the different rules that are coming out all the time. Yeah, thanks to Trump and everything else. But yes, that's right. There are opportunities for B2B businesses as well, not just the consumers. And I do see that not just in Singapore, but also in Southeast Asia. After all, like Daryl already pointed out, Thailand is a huge market, Indon as well. So these are all at our backyard, and people in the region, can collectively get more deals when they meet the right partners.
Okay. Yeah, I think Tiff, you so one point that I picked up from that insight was FDIs. ASEAN has traditionally been a magnet for FDIs. I read worldwide, the US still holds about $300+ billion in FDIs, which is the world's largest FDI attractor. Singapore is number 2 at close to 200 billion in FDIs, 175 billion last I read. So there's clearly a lot of opportunities here, and we know FDIs flow where people go. You talk about VCs, businessmen. I think there's a lot of opportunity to catalyze the convening power of something like F1 when they come here and they attend other events. So thanks for that insight, Tiff. Now I wanna double click on what you've just said, Tiff. Through the lens of speed, real-time intelligence, which is very much your field. We know that there's quite a big stake in F1, right? It's a big event, and wrong move can cost the race. And in the same way, when a brand is represented, is put on a stage in association with such a big thing like F1, the risks are elevated too. So maybe Tiffany, share with us, how do the global sponsors, brands like Heineken, DHL, Singapore Airlines, they're front and center throughout the race. What are some of the best practices that you have observed in the way they get alerted, they manage the way their brands are represented, and if there are issues, how do they step in to contain issues from blowing up?
Yeah, thanks, Marcus. I think everyone who has been through a crisis know that it's crucial to like respond to the right information as soon as possible. So of course, like you have to be prepared, but how do you be super prepared, right? So that you can answer anything in time is to have a system that helps you to differentiate the potential I would say these potential disasters that will come about, and then if you do have something that you can crawl through real-time information, then that will be like number one. So I mean, I just can give you some examples of like how I've seen such good practices in play. For example, like public sector, sometimes there are things that you can't predict, like it just happens. So I think like being alerted to something like ASAP and like acting in time is seen very favorably by the public. Recently there was the Sinkhole incident at Tanjong Pagar. I thought that the MPs and the authorities really handled it pretty well. Like immediately you see the MPs go down ASAP, they try to assure the public they are looking into it as the authorities carry out investigation and stuff like that. Then in contrast, there was another incident recently. I don't know if you guys follow in Sengkang, where there was a alleged bullying incident in the primary school.
Yes.
Although like the authorities did eventually put out a statement, it seems like it wasn't perceived to be handled as speedily. Based on what we could see online, based on the comments that are there, the public sentiments towards MOE then was like pretty negative because they felt like, oh, this is not timely and it's a bit defensive and things like that. So having maybe like, I think what I could say is like the lesson here is probably knowing when it blows out and immediately putting it out is part one. Part two is where you craft something, right? So if you can shorten that part one, then you have more time to deal with part two, meaning coming out with a game plan to deal with the situation.
Then it's interesting, right?
Maybe like something a bit more. Yeah, sorry.
No, please go ahead.
I was gonna like share a little bit about another example, like commercially. So in May this year, Warner Brothers reversed the course on its like streaming identity, and then it announced that they should rename Max to HBO Max. So then there was like a lot of online backlash. People were comparing it to say like Elon Musk, Twitter to X saga, and then questioning why we spend so much money to rebrand this and go back and forth. Because like since 2008, apparently, HBO went through 4 rebrandings. So it was like HBO Go, HBO Now, HBO Max, and then HBO Max again. But the social media team at Warner Brothers actually did very well because they saw these like negative comments and they jumped on the bandwagon. So instead of like hiding from this negativity or trying to be very defensive, they like doubled down with like self-depreciating memes, relatable show references. I don't know if there are Game of Thrones fans out there. There was this meme about Daenerys rising from the flames with the HBO logo. Then they also featured White Lotus, Tanya, the rich lady. She was like, these rebans are trying to murder me. It was from that scene as well. I thought it was funny and it actually kind of saves the situation because the social media team were quick in knowing what's going on, and then they just jump on it and make it even funnier, which is aligned to their whole like idea of being entertaining, right? So yeah.
Two interesting points there, Tiffany. I wanted to weigh in on the public sector response, as well as then now you mentioned HBO Max. 2 points that stood out for me was speed, and as opposed to the Tanjong Katong situation and compared to the Sengkang situation where there was that bullying case, in Tanjong Katong you saw political office holders taking the bull by the horns, coming forward, the MPs coming forward. They did a joint press interview. A minister in charge of the PUB agency, Graceful, came and apologized and so on and so forth. As opposed to the Sengkang situation, which seems to be MOE fronted, administrator fronted, as opposed to the people who were elected, right? The public faces, and that's interesting. Now, you also mentioned Warner Brothers, and in the same way, that humanizing effect of making fun at yourself. I think these are qualities that perhaps a brand can be inspired by. Daryl, you want to weigh in here? I mean,
Yeah,
we
no.
talk about speed and yeah.
No, it's interesting. So some of you that know us know we also do work for Singapore Tourism Board, right? So obviously I'm not sharing anything that is confidential. But I think when you think about the world we live in today and the correlation to the speed in which F1 works, I don't know how many of you have actually been privileged to sit around or to be within the F1 team and when they are in their element, right, when they're doing their work. I've had the wonderful privilege of it before I came back to Singapore because we were trying to do some work within F1 and GT Cup Asia and Porsche Carrera Cup and so on and so forth. And I'll say it's not all rocket science. I think the intelligence does help. I think the technology does help. But also because I figure we have a lot of comms professionals on the line today, on the webinar today. So maybe one pat on the back, you are very, very valuable at in what you do, because at least from experience, what I've seen is it is both a mix of art and science, right? A lot of it is still rudimentary, rooted in good communications and decision making. Obviously informed by the fact that you've got good intelligence and good software to be able to help you do that. But I think that really is where that human element comes in, right? I mean, today you cannot have a conversation without AI. And I'm pretty sure the F1 teams are already using AI at the speed that they are. They've been using it for years on already. But the ability to make split-second decisions on, when a car goes wrong or when the car explodes or when something happens before, all that predictability is still very human-driven. One of the things that I always tell clients is you can never prepare too much, right? So you always over prepare and then you hope for the best, right? And I think with major mega events like these, especially with the world that we live in today, there is only so much you can predict. And I think the ability to be agile and the ability to then shift is still a very human element, if you ask me. And I think that's why good comms people are very, very valuable. If, again, those of you that are F1 fans will always know that when the drivers do their post-race interviews with Formula One TV, there's this person looming at the side. You see this guy with the jersey standing at the side, and then he's with the phone like that, or he's like looking left and right. He's never looking into the camera. No, more often than not, that person is either the driver's manager or the head of comms for the team, because they are there to also then make sure that they can react in time, right? Because there are difficult questions and then there are difficult things to answer as well. So I think all in all, I think with the ability to use technology today to really address the speed, I think it's important. But also maybe take comfort that all of us as comms professionals really have the ability to then discern a lot quicker. And so then the question is, how do you then train your mind to be able to discern what the course of action is faster? Right? Because now you've got scenarios being presented to you faster. So the question is the decision making also therefore needs to be faster. So I think that's important because that human element becomes so much more valuable today, right? Especially in the context of F1 at least, right?
Yeah.
So I think that real-time intelligence space and in the area that we can see brands really or use F1 as a canvas for something to learn from. I think that's something that we can all learn from lah.
Okay, Daryl, I want to keep you there and elaborate a little bit about this agility and oftentimes it's culture, right?
Yeah.
So I want to go under the hood into the way your firm, your agency works on high pressure campaigns, fast paced campaigns. It has to be culture in the mode, in the way we communications work, right? So maybe share with us a little bit about what happens under the hood. How do you do debriefs in this new world, optimizations? how are you constantly learning, relearning, and improving? Share with us that experience.
Yeah, interesting. If you look at, I recently used this analogy for a few people in the team as well. I said, running a business or running an agency is a team sport, right? And because if you look at the best things around sports and the people that have achieved a lot in sports, regardless whether it's F1 where it's one driver, or whether you're in a football, whether your love is for basketball or whatever, the team sports are the same, right? Just because F1 has a driver in the front doesn't mean that it doesn't have a whole team at the back. And I think a lot of that is where that culture of reinventing and always having the ability to ask the questions, I think, are important, right? One fun fact, again, for those of you that are fans will know this, but those of you that are not fans, maybe it's a fun fact for you. McLaren as a team many years ago, about 8 or 9 years ago, was failing, right? They were failing their fans. Fans were pretty upset with them. The sponsors were upset. They weren't winning championships and so on and so forth. And then, Zoom, here comes Zach Brown, who's the CEO today. Those of you that didn't know, Zach Brown is actually a marketeer. He's not a technical person. So, as a marketing person, he came in and he said, wow, if everybody hates us, I think we got to find something that we can do better, right? And he started with culture. He started with impact. He started with making sure that he could drive commercial difference. And that commercial difference and that culture difference helped. The way he coined it was, he said, he helped the engineers, because the engineers, he could give the engineers more toys to play with, right? Because obviously the brands came in and the partners came in and everybody started to rally towards the singular goal. So he's been there 8 years now. I think he also said this. He said the first 2 years felt like 8 years. The last 8 years felt like 2 years. So I think the way to look at learning and unlearning a lot of this is that it will be difficult at the start, right? And then once you go past that phase, you then start to be able to speed ahead. And today they're a winning team. They are a winning team. They are killing the competition. They obviously are innovating a lot. And I think a lot of that is important. The last point I'll interject here, and this probably is more apparent for my team. So we have always said that technology has always been a core fabric of who we are, right? So it's not about whether you want to or you like it or not. I think that discussion has gone past today. I think we live in that world where today it has to be part of your DNA and fabric. So the question is, what are you going to do with that DNA, right? What are you going to then now be able to do with that? And I think that's important. The moment you can allow people to learn, unlearn, and relearn and keep cycling through that circle, especially with technology today, I think is where that, again, I go back to that human principle, right? That human principle of learning, unlearning, and relearning is super important, because the technology will always shift, will always advance, will always get better. And we, definitely need to be able to adapt. So I think if you think about crisis, you think about speed, you think about all of the stuff you can learn from F1, I think team culture is super important. Asking the right questions are important. I think the ability to adapt, I think it's also super important for everybody. That, at least on the call, hopefully that's a good learning piece, because you cannot be a successful team if you are not having those as core sort of principles in your team, right? So some people might feel uncomfortable because they love comfort, they love stability, they love, zooming in at 100 kilometers per hour and not going through the spectrum of between 100 to 350 km, right? But I think you got to get used to it, right? In the world that we live in today.
Yeah, as an industry practitioner, for folks who prefer comfort and cruising, maybe communication and public affairs as a profession in this age may not be the right sector for you. But Daryl, I love the way you speak about technology. I think it's quite clear that social intelligence needs to keep pace with artificial intelligence, and we're gonna focus on that in just a moment. I just want to bring Tiffany to weigh in here a little bit about the fan experience, the community. From your perspective, right? What can brands do beyond that initial burst, beyond that big moment? What are some of the ways in which you have observed brands sustain their engagement beyond F1?
Yeah, I mean, there's a great example from F1 last year. So Heineken actually did pretty well with their campaign on when you drink, never drive. It is like still talk about based on the reports after the event, because it's an element that people associate with not just with F1, but it's about the idea of having fun with alcohol, yet you want a convenient but safe way to get around. So I think with that in mind, it's about like taking it apart and zooming in on something that people would be interested in. And in order to sustain something, you have to build a community, right? And community building is about bringing together people with the same interests, beyond not just your influencers, but your like everyday people, so that it can self-sustain. I think it's very useful to encourage more like end consumers, end users to create their own content. So these days, it's all the hype, right? User-generated content. People go to F1, they take videos and it becomes something, or they go to events, they take videos. It's like a lot more effective than influencer marketing sometimes, because we ourselves are also influencers. And especially for products that are more like close to heart, like such as like skincare or something that people actually use day to day, like or sportswear, it becomes something that you trust when it comes from your friend. So if you have that community, it's great. Maybe I'll zoom in on the skincare part. So Sephora is known to be great for its UGC content, especially on TikTok. This social selling actually generates a lot of awareness, and especially it's like someone you know, when it's a lot of trust there as well. So I mean, we found that in Singapore, there are a lot of users that recommend SK2, COSRX, Laneige as good skincare labels. They talk about it on forums. You can see like people commenting about how they will recommend SK2 if you want like crystal clear skin and things like that. So these are like your day-to-day social selling. So if brands can capitalize on that, it can go a long, long while beyond just a big like billboard and or just an advertisement. And maybe zoom in on another part, it's sportswear, similarly as well. So there are also a lot of people talking online. They're asking for recommendations, right? Like let's say if I don't want to spend on Lululemon, is there an alternative I can go if I'm a bit more budget conscious? Then there was this like hype about dupes, especially among the Gen Zs. They are like looking at how it can be value for money because it looks like the actual product, but you know, just it's a lot cheaper and just as good. Like
Duplicates,
duplicate.
is it? Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, so we were like
Alright.
looking at that as well. Then some people were recommending this brand called Anya Active for like good sportswear for curvy women. I have not tried it myself, but there's a lot of all of these that you can find here and there. Maybe new brands popping up here and there. But they do get some mileage because their friends, like your friends or day-to-day people are using it. They're like, hey, this is better. So honestly, community building is about like all of us. Like we are all influencers
Tiffany,
in our way.
I want to dive into this, right? Because it's something that a lot of communicators that I've been speaking to have been trying to hack, which is how do you keep your fingers on the pulse of all these trends that are happening? I mean, dupes, that's a trend. So that's the first follow-up question. The second follow-up question is, I guess you speak about community building, which needs to happen even before the big moment, and then needs to be sustained. That can be sustained after the moment, right? So, do you have any tips about how one should get started in community building? So let's go with the first one. What are some of the platforms or ways in which we can keep abreast of all these trends so that we can be ahead of the curve?
Yeah. We do at where we do at TrueScore, we do have this platform that tracks all the conversations on social media and things like that. So one key matrix that people always look at is engagement numbers and chatter as well, or if anything goes viral. In fact, we do have this AI that's built in that can tell you anytime. You can ask them like, hey, what's like the trending topic in pop culture in Singapore, and then it can give you like, oh, these are the top 5, these are the links, you can go and take a look. So in order for brands to like, maybe you want to ride on these trends, it's a good way to get intel. And I mean, of course, that's one thing. And I do think like I do see like here and there, especially consumer brands, people are doing more and more of that. In fact, like people like IKEA, they're pretty cool at it. I feel like they always like ride on the latest trends. I mean, I'm a Game of Thrones fan, so like previously when I was like, there's this character called Hodor, and then his name is Hodor, and he can only say Hodor, and we were always wondering like what happened, man. Then eventually when the plot got revealed, it was because he was trying to defend a tag, and then he kept saying hold the door until like it became Hodor and it became his name. So IKEA saw that and then they generated that meme with the door stopper. And I think it didn't just stop there. Like there were a lot of memes that came about with like users coming on that. So it's like
Okay.
riding on the trend, and you create another community of people that start talking about it as well. So it may
Right.
not be like before the event, but it could be like anything that goes viral and you jump on it. It could be your next big moment as well. So
Right.
yeah, the idea is having a way to track these things.
Yeah.
Then you will know
And
you
have
can
the
be like the
algorithm
first to
of
jump
being
on it.
able to predict it, right? With a good level of
Yeah.
certainty.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay, I think this is a nice segue to the next point that I want to focus on, which is technology and human judgment. Everybody's
Before that, Marcus, maybe I can jump in for a fun fact again. I always tell people that F1 is a little bit like a bit of a fashion show, right? It is a show at the end of the day, right? So to build on Tips's point, right? You see a lot of the ability for brands to leverage and again use it. Don't think of it as a sporting event, right? Think of it as an ecosystem, right? And I think it's important because those of you that are fans will know people like Sir Lewis Hamilton that will always walk and strut down in his fashionable sense, and people look at what's going on there, right? And I think that's important, where you have to look at how, if the question is how do you leverage the community building around it, right? I think even as marketers and communicators online today, because obviously F1 is coming in about a month and a half from today, you should already have your plans. If you don't have your plans, then you plan for the next one next year. Then I think look at the ecosystem. I'll give you one example. Recently I was talking to an F&B outlet, and obviously our F&B friends in the space are struggling a little bit more these days. And so we were just brain dumping over a few glasses of wine, and then we were just trying to brainstorm about how we can or how they can be a bit more innovative and leverage events like F1. And so I asked them, do you know the guys at Singapore, right? Singapore. So you say instead of Singapore, you pole, Pole. And they said no. I said, oh wow, okay. Maybe you should go check them out. So for those of you that don't know, they are this F1 watching community. They only do watch parties, and it's a great space. They have I mean it's a good community to be part of, because if you're a fan, you can go watch F1 together. It's kind of like watching a soccer game together. But also the fact that you can, then as an F&B partner, you leverage it, use the space, allow them to be able to come. The community will go there and you do some expenditure out of it. So I thought that was quite interesting. I just thought that was a fun fact. Just throw it in for some people that don't know them. I'm not connected to them, but I thought it's one way that you can look at F1 and find connections around that.
Yeah, and so much of that community building is about humanity, right?
Yeah.
It's about personal connections and feeling that sense of belonging to one another. So I think it's a wonderful way to bridge what Tiffany shared with you, Daryl. You talk about technology and the way in which it serves us predictability, trend spotting, and all that, and that's like the holy grail. How are you balancing artificial intelligence-led predictions with human judgment? Because that will ultimately resonate with the community that we're seeking to cultivate, right? How are you doing that with your agency, Daryl? Then maybe I'll invite Tiffany to weigh in.
Yeah, I think AI and technology has been with us for many years, and it's not new to us. So I think we've been very accustomed, and it's already part of our DNA. So it's habitual for us, think of it, or maybe even at some point attitudinal already. So it's interesting that we don't feel adverse reactions to technology. In fact, I think the team today is hungry, right? They're like, what else is out there, right? Let me gobble it up and then see if I can put a human lens on it, right? And I think that's the way we kind of look at it. And again, if you've had the privilege of being part of F1 teams before, you realize that actually technology has always been a core component for them, right? Last year, the Williams team did a very big deal with Atlassian to come in as a main sponsor, as a technology partner. They obviously have a reason why they're going technology partners as sponsors, as major sponsors, because it does help them in accelerating scenario planning. So same thing for us, right? I mentioned earlier that today, I don't think you can be faster than the AI in terms of, again, caveat, if prompted correctly, if the core set and the raw data is correct, I don't think you can be faster at analyzing the possible scenarios. I think that's where, as communicators, the question comes is how fast can you do the decision making? Because it does change the way of working, it does change the way you think. And at the end of the day, F1 is a marketing play, in my opinion, personal opinion, right? You call it a sport, you call it a sport. But as far as I'm concerned, F1 is marketing. That's it. And I think it has been built on marketing. And one thing they've done very well ever since Liberty Media took over was, and again, fun fact, I'll drop in the fun fact. Many years ago when Liberty Media bought, sorry, not that long ago, maybe about 7, 8 years ago when Liberty Media bought F1, it was 4.4 billion. Today, I think it's about $23 billion. I attribute a majority of that to marketing decisions. Okay, so the ability to predict where audiences want to go means that they can then create new experiences. I'll give you a few more fun facts if you all don't know about the F1 piece. Las Vegas just launched the first ever F1 Experience Center. Amazing. You can sit in front and you should go and Google it and find the YouTube video. It's pretty amazing. You can get in the driver's seat of being team principal if you want as well. So super creative work around it. Those of you that know the F1 movie that just launched, it's part of the marketing play again. Why did they come out with it? They obviously predicted that the new age audiences wanted it. Many years ago, I think 2019, pre-COVID, they started the F1 movie on Netflix, right? Again, that audience segment is very different from the audience segment that I grew up, right? We never had the chance to see that. So a lot of these decisions, I think, are informed by the fact that they can see the data, can be informed of the trends. Then comes the question, why do you invest in making a Netflix partnership come alive? Why do you invest in why did they invest in making a movie, right? Why did they invest in an experience center? Why did they invest into the teams? Because clearly, when the valuation grows, the prize money grows for all the teams, right? So, so it's a connected discussion, and I think that's where the human element comes in. And again, I'll go back to a point because a lot of the people online are communicators and marketeers. I don't think you can fault data and technology for making the right scenario plannings for you for how you could leverage F1. I think the question now is how fast can you make the decision and how fast can you act, right? Because I think that part is just the starting part. The devil's in the details. So execution and experiences are key, right? So that execution experience is actually the stuff that most of the time is where most things fall apart, right? And I think the better and more human element around that is where we can make that a lot better and we can bring it alive. Yeah. So hopefully that gives you a bit of sense. But I think F1 is just marketing at the end of the day, man.
No, Daryl, I think that's interesting because at the end of the day, AI, the way large language models work, to a large extent, it's still a black box in the way it formulates it's the way they think, right? To many of us. And that's also the reason why in some ways AI isn't that trusted because we don't know how they arrive at their answers. So being able to layer over that human judgment, and say, this is the call and we should move it that way. I think
Marcus, I just wanted to add,
going to be a differentiator.
Sorry, Marcus, I just wanted to add one more thing that we're exploring, and again, maybe interesting for some of the people online. When you look at large language models and technology, one bubbling thing in the last 2 to 3 weeks that has been going on, and we've explored this for, I think, the last 8 weeks already, is GEO. I'm sure some of you would have heard it. If you've never heard of it, it's called Generative Engine Optimization. It's an interesting piece because, again, it is completely earned based. There is no paid. I mean, obviously, at some point, somebody will come in and do the paid piece. But as of today, the way the large language models show up and register results are all completely based on articles, thought leadership, news, media outlets, all of those things that are running in the background. So then as a marketer and a communicator, you got to ask yourself, wow, how do I get in on that space, right? Because that's important. Again, the large language models are pulling it, right? Absolutely. But if your presence is not there, then you're not going to show up.
Yeah, and it's so important because if search is an indicator of intent,
yes,
which is what we knew in the Google world, And Elon Musk, I think yesterday or the day before, announced Macro Heart
Yes.
as an AI simulation for Microsoft's capabilities. I think we're now seeing a bit of that trend where AI search through GPTs seem to be becoming more of a default way
Yeah.
of searching and expression of the intent. So that's an interesting trend. I want to invite Tiffany to now weigh in, right? We talk about, I mean, Tiffany, your space, your platform, it's all about intelligence, right? And I think the big payoff to intelligence is to be able to see something that hasn't been evident to most of us. How do you encourage your clients to balance a human judgment with technological prowess?
Yeah, there's a lot of points that Daryl and Marcus made about how AI is so good at as an integral part of our lives, and I really think so. In fact, if you don't, it comes to a point where if you don't use AI, then you might be losing out because it makes things a lot faster and things like that. But maybe drilling down to the technology part of things, AI is trained on things that are already out there. So the content, the information has to exist before it can come up with something. So, but particularly for our field, like comms and marketing, right, it requires more creativity and creating something new. So if we were to constantly only rely on what's on AI, what's out there, what's on GEO, then you'll always get the same thing over and over again. Then maybe at some point there will be no new content. But in order for people to stand out, to leverage on this and still stand out, I think AI could be used as like a starting point. So I asked our AI assistant, how can brands leverage on F1 without being an official sponsor? It gives some good starting points. Without basically it says, oh, you can't mention F1 without the trademarks, right? And intellectual property. I can still ride on the cloud around it. So it suggested things like proximity marketing, creating campaigns around the racing season. Maybe like what Daryl said about experiential marketing, right? All these pop-ups in the racing, but maybe you don't mention F1, you just mention like racing, just around that. And the larger part of this is entertainment and nightlife. So people, if you create content around that, you can sort of leverage on that whole situation around F1 every year. Then it's a starting point, but these things are like maybe people already know about it, but then as a communications person, how do I then value add to this? Oh, okay, but it's still a good thing. It's just like, hey, if I'm doing this, maybe 10 other people are doing it as well.
Cool.
But how do I one up them, right?
Yes,
so
indeed.
so
I think
that's where the communications person has a lot of value because you're a professional.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, picking up on that, it's like you use machines to provide you options, but the human being joins the dots. And not I mean, a lot of stuff that we do are in the analog world. And because they're not available in data silos and data lakes yet, machines don't pick it up and join the dots automatically. A lot of it still resides in human judgment and experience, right? In the non-digital world. So yeah, interesting. Now, unfortunately, time has passed us by. We booked everybody's time till 11:45. We were at 11:50. So I'm afraid, Daryl and Tiffany, I'm really enjoying this conversation, but we have to wrap up. And I want to pose you one final question. Maybe to our audience here, if you could give one piece of advice to communication and public affairs professionals, they're preparing for F1. Daryl, as you alluded to, it's a month and a half. Something so big with a global spotlight on their brand. If you could give one piece of advice on how they could make the most of it, what would that piece of advice be? Maybe I'll invite Daryl to weigh in first.
Wow, very hard, no? I think AI can simplify a lot of it. I think if you ask AI for a single answer, they will probably be able to give it to you. I think my human judgment will say it's a highly complex beast, so there will be more than one piece of advice. But I'll give you a few lah. Just throw in a few. I think a couple of things are quite practical. I think just to build off Tiff's point earlier, I think if you're in the space of direct consumer work, you definitely can leverage the mega event. I think you've got to be creative. Singapore has very intentionally made it into a festival. So think of festivalizing. I think it's important. Things like golden hours and stuff, I think are super key. The second thing I think is, if you understand F1 and if you ever had the paddock experience, I think you will. And if you haven't, please, try your way to get one. You'll realize that a lot of people that are in there, actually, they go in, they chat, they eat, they drink a glass of champagne, and then once in a while they glance to the TV, right? They're not really there to watch. They are really there for the conversations. They are really there to connect. And I think that's important. When you understand that is the reason why people congregate together, I think is where you can find opportunities from a marketing and a comm standpoint. How do you find more opportunities for people to congregate in and outside of the space, right? Because it doesn't just have to be within the festival grounds. And I think that's the key, right? So don't just look at the sport as the sport. Look at it as, what are people going there for? One of the most amazing things I learned was team principals are actually quite interesting, because beyond their jobs for, taking care of the people and the drivers and the cars and all that, actually they know their job is really to connect people. And that's why you get really successful team principals, and you also get slightly not as successful team principals. And I think that's that's a big of a difference. And then my last point to everybody is, if I had to give you a sporting analogy, I'll say this: sports in the world is all about momentum. And I think if you start the momentum to leverage mega event strategy as part of your communications and marketing efforts, remember, the momentum creates bigger momentum. So you cannot stop. It's not a one-time thing. You use it over and over and over again until you find it, and you find the sweet spot to get it successful enough, right? So yeah, sports is all about momentum. So, use it for as much momentum as you can, because at the end of the day, it's all about marketing, I'm sure.
Great, love it. It's a team sport, connections and momentum. Tiffany, what are your thoughts? One piece of advice to communications professional.
Number one would be, as someone who is not like so well educated about F1, I would definitely need to go read out everything so that you can leverage on the opportunities to come about, like which racer and then which brand and stuff like that. That's where you build out all your information, right? So then that's number one. Number two, it's like we've been saying the whole time, it's about being prepared, but you are still agile. So you have to be able to adapt. And in order to tell on these opportunities, I do like that you have a way to monitor what's going on. And then when something good comes along, like what the HBO team does, right, then you can ride on the trend and get your brand as well going, as like running a campaign that's aligned to the latest trend. Because we don't know what would happen. Maybe on race day, something happens, something funny happens or whatsoever, right? Then it's about being able to get the information in time and also reacting as fast as possible. Like Daryl said a couple of times, how fast we can make the decision, how fast we can get on it. So I don't know, like for me, it's getting myself ready, reading up and preparing, and then
always be prepared.
Absolutely, always be prepared, but still be agile, like be quick to like react.
Fantastic.
Especially in the social media world.
And you're not alone, Tiffany. I don't think many of us can lay claim to the fact that we are F1 aficionados as deeply as Daryl is. So this is a fantastic primer. This webinar itself, I've learned so much on F1 and the opportunities that lie ahead for marketeers, communicators, and public affairs professionals. So thank you to the both of you for offering us these insights. So that said, I think we need to wrap up. So everyone, thank you for joining us today for this webinar, the second webinar organized by the Public Affairs Group, PRCA Asia Pacific. I think we've learned a few things. The F1, the Singapore Grand Prix, isn't just about speed on the track. It's also about how we, public affairs professionals, communicators, can perform with some level of precision, trust for the brands that we represent. And at the start, I invited Daryl and Tiffany to share their one words to describe F1. Tiffany mentioned infectious. Daryl mentioned imaginative. I would add one more, which is integration. That over this course of this conversation, we spoke about man-machine integration. We spoke about integrating and embedding yourself in an ecosystem beyond the big moment. And finally, we spoke about community. Spotting trends, bringing them back to the community, enriching it, finding new communities. And I think the level of integration would then wrap up the 3 I's that we can leave our audience with. Now, before we wrap, I want to also invite our audience to look out for a couple of things. First, we've got a public affairs group Pulse newsletter, kindly spearheaded, championed by Ed, our secretariat for the PRCA APAC group. He's on the call too, as well as keep a lookout for a recording of this session that will be uploaded on PRCA TV. There are three additional things that I want to bring to everybody's attention. First, We Communications will be releasing its Future of Communications report come mid-October. I think if you're a subscriber to the PAG newsletter, we can spotlight it so that you can download it and you can read it, and hopefully it is of value to you, communications and public affairs professionals. Then TrueScope also has an insights report out along with a refreshed landing page where many of these insights are gathered. I checked it out. I thought it was really useful. Media intelligence data. I think many of us here eat data for breakfast in the way we decide on our marketing and public affairs decisions. So I invite you to check it out too. And finally, I want to give you a heads up that in September, we'll be hosting our third PAG Pulse webinar. And this time around, we'll be talking about government relations in Asia Pacific. It's going to be anchored by our committee members, Wai Leong from H Advisors, Clerical, and Paulus all the way from the Philippines, and he's from Vero. There's clearly going to be plenty to dive into, and all the links from what I've shared will be available in the description below. Right. So with that, please join me in thanking Daryl and Tiffany again for this fantastic webinar. Time has really passed us by. It's 11:58. We've overrun, but good things unfortunately need to come to an end. Let's keep the conversation going, guys. I think there's going to be a lot of questions and inquiries about brands who are now interested in making the most of F1 and what could come next. Thank you very much, Daryl.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, Marcus.
Thank you, guys.
Bye-bye. Have a wonderful week. Bye.
Bye.